Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Diksha Pandey, Additional Professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, KMC Manipal, and I'm also the in charge of Integrated Manipal Urogynecology Clinic here in our institute. Today I have with me Dr. Deepa Reddy, who is a junior resident in our department, and she's going to present a very interesting case of stress urinary incontinence today. So Deepa, if you are ready, can we start?
Yes, ma'am, we'll start. So today we have a case of a 39-year-old premenopausal Mrs. X hailing from Davangere. She is a manual laborer by occupation belonging to a low socioeconomic status who came to us with complaints of leaking of urine on activities of physical exertion since the past 22 years, aggravated in the last 5 to 10 years. History of presenting illness. She was apparently normal 22 years ago when she had an unattended vaginal home delivery, following which she developed this complaint of leaking of urine on activities such as lifting weights, coughing, laughing, and even on brisk walking. She complains of severe impairment of routine activities and her social life. Over the past 5 to 10 years, her complaints have aggravated to such an extent wherein now she experiences this leaking of urine even with a change in her posture. She does not give any history of any urgency. She has no history of any UTIs, nor does she have any complaints of dysuria at present. Her bowel habits are normal, and she has no complaints of mass per vagina. She has sought treatment for these complaints at multiple places over the past 15 years. Certain centers have advised a hysterectomy for this issue, even though she did not have any other gynecological complaints.
Hysterectomy was advised.
Yes, ma'am.
Suppose if she would have undergone hysterectomy.
Her stress incontinence would definitely have not been corrected, wouldn't have gotten corrected. It could have gotten aggravated. That is a possibility.
Because when you do hysterectomy, whatever ligaments, some ligaments are torn, some tissues are weak. That's why you are having stress urinary incontinence after childbirth. And when you do hysterectomy, whatever support remaining, that also you take away, then it might have got aggravated.
Yes. So she refused to undergo hysterectomy, and but she was neither offered any pelvic floor muscle training over the past 20 years, nor was she offered any sling surgeries. She is not a known case of diabetes, or asthma, COPD, or any other musculoskeletal or neurodegenerative disorders. She does not have any surgeries in the past. Obstetric history. She is a para 2 living 2. Both were vaginal deliveries. She was married off early at an age of 13 to 14 years. So she had her first delivery while she was 15 years old. So this was an institutional delivery and the delivery was uneventful. But the second delivery she had at 17 years of age was an unattended home delivery. She says that she delivered a baby weighing about 3.75 kgs. So in this delivery she sustained a perineal tear which required repair at a local hospital.
So Deepa, you said 3.75 and you said it was a home delivery.
Yes, ma'am.
How did she weigh the baby? So accurately she told that 3.75
That's because after this delivery she sustained a perineal tear, so at that time she had to be taken to a local hospital. She says that the baby was weighed there, but she stresses on the fact that it was a big baby and that the delivery was difficult. Personal history. She gives history of strenuous physical activity on a daily basis as she is a manual laborer. She does not give any history of sudden gain or loss of weight. She also gives history of excessive tea consumption, about 4 to 5 cups per day.
So after this history, can you summarize the salient points? It is a very typical history for any case of stress urinary incontinence. And if you have to learn, maybe this is the first case which you should see how the patients present. So Deepa, can you summarize this case for the viewers?
Yes, ma'am. To summarize the history, we have a 39-year-old premenopausal
So young
woman,
patient, premenopausal patient.
She's a manual laborer by occupation. With strenuous physical activity on a daily basis, who has had 2 teenage deliveries, one of which was unattended with a complicated by a perineal tear, and she has developed these complaints of stress incontinence immediately after her second delivery.
As you said, teenage deliveries when the tissues are not very good and maybe low socioeconomic status.
On examination, she was moderately built and nourished, so with a height of 148 centimeters and a weight of 52 kgs. Her BMI was 23.2 kg per meter square. Her gait appeared to be normal. She had no pallor, icterus, cyanosis, or lymphadenopathy or clubbing. CVS and RS examinations were unremarkable. Per-abdominal examination revealed a soft abdomen. There was no tenderness. There were no features of ascites, and there was no organomegaly. Pelvic examination was done in a dorsal position with a full bladder. So, an external examination, there were no signs of any atrophy or excoriations. Uniform cough stress test done was positive. On perspiculum examination, her cervix was healthy, and she had no cystocele or rectocele. She had no UV descent. On pervaginal examination, her uterus was of normal size. It appeared to be antiverted, and bilateral fornices were free and non-tender. Her levator muscle tone, as per modified Oxford scale, was 3, and sensory and motor integrities were maintained.
So now, I think in the entire examination, the only positive thing you got was a uniform cough stress test. So can you tell in detail what it is? Because I think in SUI that's the most important test we do. Please tell what is it is. It is devised by ICS, International Continence Society, because what was happening, and it has happened with me also, with juniors, like in gynecology, when the patient comes, they will tell the patient to pass urine and then come and lie down, whatever complaint it is, and then they will tell to cough again and again, and then they will say that there is no SUI. When the bladder is empty, patient cannot have any evidence of SUI even when you tell her to cough, because bladder is entirely empty. And the other extreme of that is, if the bladder is very full also, if there is already 1 or 2 liters of urine, if you tell any normal person also in that kind of situation to cough, maybe because of intra-abdominal, she might leak a drop or 2. So you have to settle somewhere in between. Seeing these two extremes, which was happening very frequently in normal practice, ICS a few years ago, some 2018, came up with this test which we call as uniform cough stress test. So can you tell me how do you elicit this test?
To elicit this test, first we ask the patient to fill her bladder. And
fill her bladder up to what? How much she should fill?
At least till she has the first urge to pass urine.
Yes.
If her bladder is full, it's even better for us to elicit.
But it is okay, like 200 to 400 ml. That is the time when patient gets the first sensation
urge to pass urine.
So as soon as patient, you can tell that whenever you feel like having for the first time, come and tell me, I'll examine you that time.
Yes, ma'am. Then we position her in dorsal position, supine dorsal position. We expose the labia minora so that we can directly visualize the urethra, and we ask the patient to cough a total of 4 times.
Where should you stand?
And we stand to the side of the patient, not right in front of her.
Yes.
Otherwise we'll get soiled if she has severe SUI. So we ask the patient to cough, and then we look for leaking of urine from the urethra. So in this case, out of all the 4 times, she had a very strong stream of urine with each time she coughed. Yes.
So this is what we call as uniform cough stress test. If any examination, so I keep on telling that Q-tip test and other Marshall's test, all these tests have lost their significance in modern urogynecology, because now we have understood that intrinsic sphincter deficiency and supportive tissue weakness, these are not 2 different hypermobility which we used to call it. These are not actually entirely 2 different pathologies or etiologies or entities for SUI. Both of them, to little more degree or less degree, coexist in every patient because the etiology is same. Okay, so every patient will have little bit, it might differ in percentage, but every patient has some sphincter deficiency and some hypermobility kind of thing. So we do not differentiate these SUI based on this classification now. So what is your clinical diagnosis?
So my clinical diagnosis is a 39-year-old para-2 living to premenopausal women with severe stress urinary incontinence.
Okay. And so how do you want to treat her now? She's 39-year-old. For 20 years she's having stress incontinence.
So we'll first start by evaluating her. We could do routine investigations like a urine microscopy to rule out any existing UTI. We could do a transvaginal ultrasound to rule out other pelvic pathologies. And
do you think that urinary tract infection is the cause of SUI in this patient?
No, ma'am. In this patient, it's unlikely because she gives a typical chronic history for 22 years. So
might not be a cause.
UTI is unlikely. So then we can, with the ultrasound, we could also do a post-voidal residual urine estimation. Then
can you tell what is the technique of doing post-voidal residual urine?
Yes. So we ask the patient to void, and following which we do a transvaginal ultrasound. So we visualize the bladder, and we take 3 dimensions
Very
of the
good.
bladder, and we need to calculate it by multiplying and then dividing it by 2.
By 2. That's the formula to get the residual.
Residual urine volume.
And how much residual volume we consider as normal?
Anything less than 100 is normal.
Less than 50 is normal,
Less
but
than
up
50
to
is-
100 is okay. Less than
Okay.
50 is definitely within normal limits.
Up to 100 is acceptable. Okay. And then since this is a case of severe stress incontinence, she will definitely require a surgical intervention. Pelvic floor muscle training alone will not be of much help to her. So then we could
But
go
should you
ahead.
teach her pelvic floor muscle training?
Yes, ma'am. So it will be like an adjunct therapy to our surgical intervention. She can continue training her pelvic floor muscles after the surgery as well. So
Because she will again go back to her normal
Normal
activity
activities.
of manual labor, whatever heavy work she was doing. Then again, there are chances that tissues might get
might get loose.
relaxed. And SUI is not the only problem, because pelvic floor muscle training will prevent many other problems like posterior compartment problems also. Maybe if she has little risk of pelvic floor when she becomes
Prolapse.
menopausal prolapse. All these because she has shown once that birth injuries has caused some kind of trauma. Now maybe good estrogen in her body, she is just 39 years old, maybe supporting the tissues. And if she does not do any exercise or does not try to strengthen that, maybe immediately after menopause she might, those things which are now hidden might get revealed as soon as she gets into menopause.
And then we have to go ahead with the sling surgery for her,
Okay.
because that is the present gold standard.
So modern, very important that in modern urogynecology, though we have seen and we have read thousands of, not thousands, 100 to 100 surgeries, different kind of surgeries for management of SUI, but presently the gold standard is
Sling surgery.
sling surgery, mid-urethral sling. And what kind of mid-urethral slings?
We tension-free vaginal tapes.
Tension-free vaginal. We call it TVT, and the full name is, I'll repeat it again, tension-free vaginal tape. It's not transvaginal name, though it is done, the surgery is done from the vaginal end only, but the name is tension-free vaginal tape.
And under tension-free vaginal tapes, we have either obturator variety or the retropubic variety. We usually prefer the retropubic variety for patients with severe incontinence, patients who are obese, but cost is a factor because the retropubic variety of taping is customized.
We have to import it.
Yes, and
we have to
it
import
needs
it
to
in
be
India.
imported.
At least in our institution, we do not have the Indian version of retropubic tape. So we are importing it from outside and putting. So the cost is definitely a factor. But some of the government of India schemes have now started covering that. So that is a very good thing for us. So how to decide? If we leave the cost apart, I think we have to, as Deepa told, we have 2 factors to decide whether we want to do a retropubic approach and an obturator. Retropubic approach, basically we choose for patients who are having severe degree of urinary incontinence. And how to decide severity?
Severity can be decided by subjectively and objectively. So there are certain.
So I'll ask you one question. When I forgot to ask, very important question. Do you want to do urodynamic study for this patient?
No, it is not required for her because this is a clear-cut case of stress urinary incontinence. So usually we consider doing urodynamic testing when patients, when we suspect that the patient could be having any other mixed component in addition to the stress component, or when the history that is given by a patient is unclear to understand the type of incontinence.
Yes.
And also when a patient has been given some sort of treatment and still persists
Failed
to have failed treatment, still persists to have some sort of incontinence, we do it to understand what exactly is happening with her.
So for this kind of clear cut, when the patient has, I am having this, you have seen that exactly that thing is happening, when everything is coinciding, she does not have any urgency, nothing else, no pelvic prolapse, then definitely this patient does not require a urodynamic study to confirm. So those countries, those setups where they perform routine urodynamic testing, they take some measurements like urethral closure pressure to see the severity of what do you call stress urinary incontinence, and based on that they decide that which tape you want to put. Why should we prefer? You said that for stress urinary incontinence, if it is severe, we prefer retropubic. So why do you want to put a retropubic tape for severe incontinence? What is the difference?
Because a retropubic taping fits much more snugly under the urethra than an obturator taping.
Yes.
So
Obturator tape is more or less like bigger circle.
Yes.
Okay, it does not come in too much contact with the urethra, while this
The
thing, as
retropubic-
Deepa said, retropubic tape very snugly holds almost 3/8 circle of the urethra, and it is very good for stress urinary incontinence, which is of severity. What about complication? Which tape has more complication?
Ma'am, the retropubic tape has more complications because it is closer.
So what kind of complication it can have?
Sometimes patients can develop acute retention of urine post-operatively because the tape is sitting too tightly under the urethra. Also, there can be other intraoperative complications like injury to nearby surrounding vessels, which can result in hematomas, or there could be a direct injury to the bladder as well, because this procedure is done blindly. And also long
perioperative complications. So what I want to tell you, Deepa, today, just understand that though during the surgery, the complications are more in TVT group, in retropubic approach, okay? But if they are identified then and there, we'll discuss it a little later when we are discussing the management. It can be sorted out then and there. But if you compare long-term complication, actually the reports are, and the logic also says that long-term complication like erosion from the groin area, erosion from the vagina, because when you put a TVTO, retro-obturator approach, it traverses more of the vaginal wall. So vaginal erosions are more common with TVTO or obturator approach as compared to so when we compare complication, we have to divide them into short-term and long-term. Short-term or immediate or post-operative or peroperative complications are definitely more in which group? In retropubic, while long-term complications are more common in
obturator.
How do you have you seen any case of retropubic taping?
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. So tell.
Yeah. So to perform this procedure, we first position the patient in lithotomy position. We prefer spinal anesthesia.
Why do you prefer spinal anesthesia?
So that we can elicit the cough stress test intraoperatively and adjust the tension of the tape accordingly. Because
if patient is under general anesthesia, she won't be able to cough, and we won't be able to adjust it properly.
So we first catheterize the bladder, and then about 1 centimeter beneath the urethra, that is in the mid-urethral region, we give a 1 centimeter incision. We dissect the anterior vaginal wall, and the needle along with the tape attached to it is inserted to go into the retropubic space behind the pubic symphysis, and then it comes up on
so
the
when you are introducing the tape on one side of the urethra, very important that your assistant should put a probe inside the bladder and deflect the bladder to the other side.
Yes, this is done to avoid bladder injury. Yes. So we guide the needle along with the tape through the retropubic space, and then it comes transabdominally about 1 centimeter lateral to the pubic symphysis.
1 centimeter lateral to the midline. Above the pubic symphysis, 1 centimeter lateral to the midline.
We repeat the same on the opposite side, and we adjust the tension. We ask the patient to cough when there is about 1 drop of urine leaking. That is the adequate amount.
Why 1 drop of leaking? Why you want patient to leak? Why don't you want that patient should have 0 leaking?
If we adjust it that tightly, she could go into retention. After spinal recovery, bladder regains some tone, so she could
muscles
go into
also, pelvic muscles also regain. Yes. So the ideal situation in OT is you have to tell the patient to cough, and you should make the tape should be loose only, okay? It should never be tight, but only that adjustment you have to do. That patient still leaks 1 or 2 drops of urine. If you do it more tight, definitely in post-op period, patient is going to go into retention because all her muscles will become out of the effect of anesthesia, and they will be active, they will have their basal tone. Okay, so that's the one trick you have to remember.
And then at the end of the procedure, we do perform a routine cystoscopy to look for any bladder perforations or injuries.
So I give you a scenario. So you are doing Deepa the procedure, and then you see that the tape is needle is going through the bladder. Will you panic?
I will not panic.
Very good. What will you do?
So we need to first retract the tape out of the bladder,
Mhm.
and then since this needle is only about 5 millimeters in circumference, we can leave the perforation in situ if there is no bleeding. In most cases, there will not be any bleeding.
Mhm.
So, and we need to leave the catheter in situ for about a period of 10 days so that the bladder can itself heal.
Even if there is a bleeding, you should not do anything. You should not try to do anything. Give some Trenexa, give her like catheterize it for 5 to 7 days, and it will stop on its own. You don't have to take a bite or do anything. Even if bleeding is there, it will stop.
And the tapes, after the procedure, the tapes, some prefer to cut the tapes immediately with the tension that was adjusted intraoperatively. We could do a modification of it. We could leave the tape outside, and after 48 to 72 hours, when the patient has recovered completely out of anesthesia, we could again perform a cough stress test and adjust the tension of the tapes once more before finally cutting off the edges.
Very good. So this is what technique we are routinely following for 3 to 4 years in our hospital now. And last year, based on this simple modification of performing TVT and TVTO, we have published a paper also. If you want, you can go through and see the technical variation in that. So now we prefer that, and we are getting much better results.
with that.
Because if you just cut the tape at the OT table and the patient, suppose it is little loose or little tight, then you are in very difficult situation how to adjust it. So keeping it for 2 days really has helped us and our patients to have a better outcome as we were having before. So all of you who are doing TVT, TVTO can perform this kind of adjustment. It really helps. Okay, I'll give you one more scenario. Suppose your needle head on tape has perforated and you have not seen it. You did not do cystoscopy, or you did not do cystoscopy, or you saw, you thought that, okay, leave it alone. You are scared, you don't want to do it. Is it dangerous to leave a tape like this?
Yes, ma'am. It is very dangerous to leave a tape in situ because when we do not detect what has happened, or when we leave the tape inside the bladder like that, the tape can get adjusted as a foreign body over there, and later on it will be really difficult for us to extract it out of the bladder.
So it will keep on causing recurrent irritation, inflammation, infection, and later if the patient comes with like symptoms of recurrent UTI and now somebody diagnoses that tape is inside, it is really very difficult because it is fibrosed. When during intraoperatively, it is still in a soft sleeve of a plastic. So it is very easy to pull it out, yes, retrieve it. But later when you remove that sleeve and patient has this all net or mesh kind of thing, it is a very good nidus for fibrosis and infection, and it is very difficult. While you are retrieving this ticket, you could totally damage the bladder also. So it is a very difficult situation in that. Okay. So I think any other thing, what are the post-operative complications patient can have?
The most common complication is urinary retention, probably because of a tightly sitting tape. And there can be long-term complications such as erosions. Not much severe complications if it is done right.
Yes. And this is the last question, Deepa, I want to ask you. Have you seen us doing a tape adjustment post-operatively? Can you tell in detail to the viewers what is the technique we follow in our hospital?
So to adjust the tape, about 72 hours, that is 2 to 3 days after the procedure, we first ask the patient to drink a lot of water so that her bladder is full. And then this tape adjustment does not require any sort of anesthesia. So we make her lie down in a supine position and in a dorsal position. And we again elicit the cough stress test and see if she is having any leaking of urine. And if there is leaking, we just look at the stream or whether it's a dribble, whatever it is, and then we adjust the tape again.
We make it little tight.
So we then ask the patient to void and ask her if she was able to void with ease without any interruption. So, and then we perform an ultrasound to look at the post-voidal residual urine volume. If it is less than 50, it's perfect for us. But if it is less than 100, even if it's 50 to 100, we do not do anything about it because that's good enough. But if it's more than 100, it means
so suppose it is 170. What will
170, it means that she has some sort of retention. So we need to loosen the tape a little bit.
How do you loosen the tape?
Ma'am, we proceed transurethral and we go through the urethra and we push the tape.
What do you put?
With a urinary catheter.
No, we put a dilator. Hager's dilator, some smooth dilator we put, and we go with put a little xylocaine gently, put it in the urethra and then gently hold. And you do not have to negotiate through the sphincter. The tape
Okay.
is in the mid-urethra.
Mid-urethra.
So you just have to go 1 or 2
1 or 2
centimeter inside
centimeters.
till you feel that
Yes.
tape, resistance of the tape. Then you just have to give a downward traction very gently. It is not painful. Usually patient will say some kind of discomfort, but it is not much. You are not going into the bladder, just outside you are doing. And it is very effective because if it is done in when the tissues have not healed, not fibrosed in 2 to 3 days within that time frame, if it is done, it is very easy to do, and it immediately patient's stream improves, residual volume comes down.
Also, we do not have to open any incision.
Yes, we do not have to open any incision. And after that, once you have adjusted that she is not leaking, she has no residual, means within normal limit of residual volume in her urine, then you can just snugly just flush to the skin of the abdomen. You can just cut the tape, and no need to. The stab wounds are so small that you don't have to put a suture also. Usually we put like normal handiplast or the banded what sticker banded what comes, and we send the patient it heals on its own. So I think it is a very good surgery, and I think you explained very well. It was a very typical case, and everything you answered properly and told. I think it was good discussion, and it will come with more little complicated cases sometimes and other cases of SUI, which we keep on seeing in our OPD soon. Till then, keep watching.